Good morning, everyone. I'm Muriel Bowser. I am here in the Marion Barry building in Washington, D.C. I am joined by members of my administration, particularly City Administrator Kevin Donahue, Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice Lindsay Appiah, and Acting Chief of Police Pamela Smith. We are here to provide a situational update on public safety in Washington, D.C. The team will go over recent data and trends, recent case closures, and strategies we are utilizing to reduce crime and increase safety. It's been about a month since I signed the Prioritizing Public Safety Emergency Amendment Act of 2023, which includes many provisions of my Safer and Stronger Act that I introduced earlier this year. And we know that many common sense solutions are necessary to fill the gaps in our public safety ecosystem. We also know that we continue to need a policy environment that supports effective enforcement and reduces crime. And we will continue to work with the council to make sure we have the right policies, tools, laws, and investments to drive down crime. In a few moments, Chief Smith will provide an update on some of the interventions she and her team are using. We'll also talk about some new interventions we will implement. And the city administrator and deputy mayor will provide updates on my recent mayor's order that directed a citywide review of our violence reduction programs. So we continue to urge residents to work with us to get illegal guns out of our community. And we remind our constituents that you can call or text MPD anonymously. And if your tip leads to an arrest, there is a cash reward available. And if your tip leads to an arrest or seizure of a ghost gun, an even higher reward is available. I'll take a moment to mention that we also want you to help us by getting a private security camera at your home or business. And we have programs available that can assist at ovsjg.dc.gov, ovsjg.dc.gov. And we'll come back at the end of the presentation to talk a little bit about school preparation as well. We're going to try to get through our slides pretty quickly. I know that the chief needs to respond to a scene, and she'll tell you a little bit about that as well. But we have some slides prepared that will start, I think, with Deputy Mayor Appiah.
So certainly we always say that data doesn't tell the full story, but it is an important point for us in seeing how we're doing. And so overall, we're up 38% in violent crime driven, as you can see, by increases in homicide and robbery, and we're up 29% in property crime, primarily driven on car theft, which is something that we know is prevalent both here in the district and nationally, which puts us up 31% overall over last year. But we also are encouraged by some of the results that we're seeing in the time frame that the mayor just mentioned over the past 30 days in which we've had Chief Smith and new legislation. And so in the past 30 days as compared to the previous 30, we've seen some significant decreases, which we're encouraged by. You can see here that we're actually down 19% in this current 30-day period as compared to the previous, with significant decreases in robbery at 23% and 14% in the other. We're still seeing some challenges in homicide that we know require continued diligence and work. We are also encouraged again to start to see some decreases in this 30-day period in motor vehicle theft, which is down 4%, and burglary 12%. We're still up 11% in property crime this 30-day period, but we will continue to work to increase on these decreases over time. And so with that, I'm going to turn to Chief Smith to talk about a number of the initiatives and strategies and how we're doing that are helping us to see these decreases and that we believe will help us to continue to see decreases in crime in our city.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good morning. Before I get into my presentation and the MPD initiatives, I would just want to give a preliminary update on the officer-involved incident that we are currently attending. Our officers responded to calls at the 7400 block of Georgia Avenue Northwest to sounds of gunshot. Our officers responded to that location. We were advised that this is a domestic violence incident. When officers arrived, the description of the suspect was transmitted across the radio waves. The officers responded, saw a person fitting that description. The officer engaged, had a conversation with the suspect. The suspect turns, produces a weapon, and our officer fires one shot. At this time, the suspect has been transported to an area hospital, and our officer is okay. Immediately after this public safety summit, I will be responding to that location to address the issues at that location. All right, good morning. Again, I'm Acting Chief Pamela Smith of the Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington, D.C. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Mayor Bowser and members of the senior team for their continuous support of the MPD and their efforts to support keeping our city safe. Mayor Bowser has been an amazing support since assigning me in this role as Acting Chief of Police. Each day, the men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department patrol our neighborhoods. They investigate crimes and make arrests, but that is not all that we do. Our officers also engage our community to build better relationships and provide support to our residents at times when they need it the most. What I want to emphasize is that our community is our greatest partner when fighting crime. I've been out in the community every single day over the past month, and I've been listening to what the community is concerned about, and I'd like to share with you what I've heard. One of the asks I've heard is members of the community want to see officers in their communities. They want to know their officers and work together with the neighborhood to solve problems. And we're doing just that. I've asked each of our 7 district commanders to conduct at least one community walk each week in their district for the next year. That's at least 364 proactive community connections where MPD and the community can work together to solve issues. And it doesn't stop there. We also conduct multi-agency walks with DC government entities, and I'm going to continue to be out in the community as well as our leadership team to address the concerns of our citizens. Community involvement is certainly a step in the right direction towards building trust in our communities and building relationships with our residents. When I was appointed as Acting Chief of Police, MPD was seeing a 60% increase in robberies. We've worked to identify high-density areas and timeframes these incidents most occurred. With this data, we look at ways to decrease those robberies, and 3 weeks ago, we launched our Robbery Suppression Initiative. Thursday through Sunday, we are staffing dedicated resources that are focused on the prevention of violent crime, specifically robberies and carjackings. Since launching this initiative, we've seen a 21% decrease in robberies. The officers assigned to the unit have arrested 30 people and taken 26 guns off of the street. Initiatives like this one will allow us to focus and hold violent offenders accountable, and we will continue launching initiatives such as this to address issues that are driving crime. As I've listened to the community, I consistently hear people and residents talk about people who are driving unsafely on our city streets. We have seen a nearly 50% increase in traffic fatalities this year over last year, and we have way too many people blatantly disregarding traffic laws. In June, we launched our traffic safety compliance checkpoints, and this is an opportunity to educate those driving on our streets to change their behavior to make our roads safer. Since June, we've conducted 7 safety traffic compliance checkpoints throughout the city. We've issued 698 notices of infractions. We've made 23 arrests for no permit, 2 arrests for DUI, 4 arrests for carrying a pistol without a license, and 1 arrest for open container of alcohol. What I believe is that we are making progress, and I want to share with you some of the results of our work that you may not have heard about. In the past month, our detectives have closed 13 homicide cases, and we are making arrests in other significant cases too. And I want to briefly share a few details from just 2 of them. The first was on Friday, July 28th, where MPD arrested 4 juvenile males, 2 15-year-olds, 1 16-year-old, and a 17-year-old for a combined of 13 carjacking offenses and 3 armed robbery offenses. At the time of their arrest, we recovered 4 firearms. The second incident occurred on Friday, August the 11th, where MPD arrested an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 16-year-old for 5 armed robberies and armed carjacking offenses that occurred over the last 3 weeks. At the time of their arrest, 4 firearms were recovered. I want to thank the men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department for their hard work in bringing these cases to a closure. We are holding violent offenders accountable. Each of these cases and many more were closed because of community cooperation and good video evidence. And as I think about and speak about good video evidence, one of the most valuable tools for MPD to address crime is through an investment in security cameras. The district's private security camera rebate program creates a rebate for residents and businesses to purchase and install security cameras on their property and register them with the Metropolitan Police Department. As you have heard today, video footage is extremely helpful for our detectives in identifying and closing cases. We are asking our residents to continue to take advantage of the district's camera rebate program. In addition, if you have information about illegal firearms in our community, please share that information with the Metropolitan Police Department. We cannot do it alone, and we are committed to a strong partnership with the communities we serve. Part of our crime-fighting strategy is to safely remove illegal firearms from the community. This year so far, we've recovered more than 1,800 illegal firearms in the district. We want to thank our MPD partners as well as our federal partners who have assisted us in this effort. 257 of those guns were ghost guns, and 98 had an automatic conversion device, making them capable of firing like fully automatic weapons. We've made 238 arrests for felons in possession of a gun. So far in August, we've recovered 122 illegal firearms. Some of them are displayed on the screen right now. We need to get illegal guns out of our communities, and we're doing it with the help of our federal partners. We also need the community's help with this effort. If you know of anyone that illegally possesses a firearm, please call us at 202-727-9099 or text our tip line at 50411. You can remain anonymous. With the support of Mayor Bowser, the rewards associated with gun tips has increased. Any gun tip that leads to the arrest and seizure of an illegal firearm results in a $1,000 minimum reward and a maximum reward of $2,500. Tips leading to the arrest and seizure of a ghost gun or a firearm equipped with an automatic conversion device are eligible for an additional reward of up to $5,000 for a total possible reward of $7,500. We are always looking for ways to help our community. After we saw the thefts of the Kia and Hyundai vehicles rise because of a viral social media video that exploited an issue with the vehicles, we worked with Hyundai to hold the first ever in the nation mobile clinic here in the District of Columbia to help resolve this problem. More than 1,100 people came to get a software update to fix their vehicles, which makes our community safer. So what's next? We are continuously looking for ways to improve public safety in the District of Columbia and working very closely with Mayor Bowser and other city agencies to focus on a whole-of-government approach. Another issue that has impacted our community is that young people involved in crimes, in particular, overnight. MPD will initiate a juvenile curfew enforcement pilot in partnership with the Department of Youth and Rehabilitation Services. Officers from our Youth and Family Engagement Bureau will patrol 7 initial key focus areas to identify juveniles in violation of curfew. Now, our focus here is to ensure that our youth are safe. Parents, we want you to know where your kids are overnight. We want our city's youth to be safe and to be home during overnight hours. Our goal isn't to arrest our young people, but we want to ensure the safety of our youth here in the District of Columbia. I've also heard from the community about the need for more CCTV cameras across the city. With Mayor Bowser's help, we will be adding 50 additional CCTV cameras throughout the city. Mayor Bowser has committed to doubling the number of cameras citywide over the next 2 years. This is in response to what the community has asked for and will help us to ensure that we have good video in some of the areas that are most impacted by high crime. As the community knows, The Metropolitan Police Department is working very diligently to increase the numbers of officers, and we are taking every opportunity to recruit men and women to join our department. Over the past month, I've taken steps to add additional resources for our recruiting team by standing up an in-person recruitment outreach unit. Since the announcement last year of the hiring bonus, the Metropolitan Police Department has seen our candidate pool pipeline grow by 20%. I'm proud to say today that MPD has the strongest applicant pipeline since 2019, with over 260 active applicants in process. In the first 6 months, we had an average of 90 applicants in this process. This expanded pipeline is a combination of multiple efforts, but we are continually looking to increase our efforts. Since July 2022, 30% of MPD new officers were referred by a member of the department. And I want to strengthen where we've seen success. Our people are our best recruiters. With Mayor Bowser's support, we are announcing today a pilot initiative to further incentivize the members of the Metropolitan Police Department to refer more people to our agency. Starting today, any MPD employee who refers another candidate will be eligible to receive a $5,000 referral bonus for police officers and $2,000 for new cadets who are onboarded to the department. Thank you, and I will turn it back over to Deputy Mayor Lindsay Appiah.
Thank you, Chief. So I will give a brief update on the mayor's order, which, as you know, in May, Mayor Bowser directed all of us deputy mayors to look across our system and to make recommendations about ways that we can truly have a whole of government response to reducing crime. And so each of us as deputy mayors did that, working together, and made a number of recommendations. And here's some of them. The Deputy Mayor for Education, we know that one of the things that we're seeing with our young people is the need for stronger conflict resolution skills. That what would have been normal sort of fights and arguments are turning sometimes into violent encounters. And so there are recommendations that the Deputy Mayor has made to help us to augment conflict resolution, and recommendations around, we've heard, and certainly when the mayor hosted principals at the beginning of the year, that they need more tools, disciplinary tools, to increase accountability and to prevent a lot of these smaller incidents from repeating or escalating. So the deputy mayor has made recommendations around that, and you can see these.
Deputy Mayor, I'm going to jump in for 1 second because I know the chief needs to get to the scene. So we're going to break to see if there are a few questions for her, and then we can get back to the update. Yeah, Mark.
Can you tell us, one, the condition of the victim who was shot, how many times the person was shot, and do you believe that that person was actually the suspect from the domestic violence incident, and was anybody injured in that incident?
So, Mark, thank you for the question. What I provided for you preliminarily is what I know at this time. I think that it would be best for me to respond to the scene to make sure that I have the accurate information. What I've shared with you is what I know up to this point.
Is there anybody else here? I mean, I only press you now because we're on TV right now there, and we'd like to be able to report in this hour what we can as far as the condition of the suspect, if there was an exchange of gunfire.
What I do know, based on the 911 call that we received from one of the domestic violence victim, was that the subject fired a shot at her, provided us with a description of the suspect. Our officers were in the area. They responded to the area, saw someone fitting that description. Our officer engaged him, contacted him. The suspect turned around, produced a firearm, and our officers shot the suspect. And as I stated before, the suspect was transported to a local hospital. And that's all I have right now. I don't want to give out any other information that may not be accurate.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Yes, Stephanie?
Last week we had a discussion about Austin Hall about national parks. About would that help your officers? Did you get to have that conversation with Councilmember Trayon White, and what have the discussions with the mayor been?
I have not yet had an opportunity to have a discussion with Trayon White, but I will follow the directions of the mayor when it comes to any conversations around the National Guard. I will take her counsel.
And then on the recruiting, if I could ask, can you talk about the numbers of actual members who have passed the academy and are sworn officers? What does that look like? We understand the applications are in, but when it comes to officers on the department, what does that look like?
So right now we have about 3,380 officers, and we have about 120 cadets. As the applicants are coming in, we're going through the background process as we typically would, and we're getting those folks in our recruit classes to increase the number of officers that we have in the Metropolitan Police Department.
So are you hopeful that those numbers are?
I'm very hopeful.
Why?
I'm very hopeful because I think, like I said before, our officers are our best candidates. I've had the opportunity to join our first class under my leadership, and I've seen the excitement. We intend to increase those numbers. Right now, I think we are graduating a class on Friday with I think about 14 officers, and then another group of 14 will be entering the academy on Monday.
A couple more for the, yes, sir. Could you just introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Rockefeller Twyman, and if I had the money that my name denoted, I would give it to start the Muriel Bowser Foundation to end gun violence. I support what you're doing, and I know that you and the chief are both women of faith. So I'm wondering, have you ever thought about having prayer, days of prayer and fasting to end the violence? Because you're dealing with demons out here.
Yeah. Let me just answer your question, Rockefeller, if I might. So in addition to what we've discussed here, we have a number of initiatives that are inside the government and outside the government. We have invited community organizations, including faith organizations, to participate with us in proven strategies. So we would be open in a number of the grant programs that the deputy mayor manages to consider programs that we think work. Let me take a few more press questions for the chief, and then I'm going to have to allow her to get uptown.
I'm Ted Oberg from News 4. Thanks for making time. Chief, you have said in the past that you believe that people want to see more officers. You also have said that you believe that putting more officers where there is more crime is something that's important to you. Statistics suggest that hasn't been done. Have you moved or redeployed officers into areas that are seeing increases in violent crime yet? And if not, why not?
So I think back in April 28, 2023, the Focus Patrol Initiative was launched. And it was a 90-day initiative where we partnered with George Mason University to look at having our officers assigned to high crime impact areas across the district and all 7 districts. And what we've seen in that space is that there is a 30% decrease with our Focus Patrol efforts. That is a 90-day program. It is my intention to continue that program in conversations with Dr. Lum from George Mason University. And we have seen a decrease in those spaces where we've had our Focus Patrol initiatives.
Your stats show decreases in robbery, but not other areas.
Well, I'm specifically focusing on those other areas where we actually assigned officers, because I think that was the question, where we've assigned officers in those high impact areas. And we do have the data to support that, and if you need it, we will provide it for you.
I've asked, I've been denied it, but
okay.
We can follow up.
Yes, sir.
Chief. Okay, Peter. Oh, I'm sorry. There's already here, and then Peter, and then I think Chief, you're going to have to take off.
Yeah.
Chief, with all the robbery suspects you've arrested in the past month, to the best of your knowledge, do you know if the U.S. Attorney is holding them before trial and pursuing charges in those cases?
What I can say, specifically with the juveniles, yes, some of them have been held. I think since July 24th through August 8th, we have arrested, in conjunction with some of our federal and partners, we've arrested over 103 juveniles. 31 of them have been held and detained. And I think that's a good effort in the space that we're in right now. One more question.
Peter?
Oh, my bad.
Peter?
This is for the chief and for the mayor. Homicides in 50 of 70 major cities surveyed by major city chiefs have dropped precipitously over the last 6 months. DC is an outlier in that category. And most of the cities share some of the same problems and some of the same challenges and have some of the same solutions of of focusing on where crime is concentrated, illegal weapons, and so forth. What do you attribute to why DC has been unable to get it down this year?
Chief, do you want to start?
Yes. Well, Peter, thank you for the question. I think for us, we're seeing a lot of guns come into the area, and what we found based on some of our investigation is that there are a lot of conflict resolution that's not happening with a lot of these suspects. We also find that some of this is very targeted in some aspects. We are certainly working with our ATF, our local, state, and federal partners to really deal with the illegal guns that are coming in the District of Columbia. What I also presented to you today is the number of guns that we're recovering off of the street, which is a significant number in years past. And I think when you talk about the homicides, that's where the increase in numbers are coming from. And we've been working very diligently also with the U.S. Attorney's Office to see what we can do in order to impact, if you will, some of these guns coming into the district.
I would add that one of the things that we don't necessarily talk about is that last year the District of Columbia was one of the only jurisdictions in the group that you're talking about to see decreases in homicide from 2021 to 2022. And so absolutely, we recognize that homicide is not what we want it to be, but just like the cities that you're describing that are seeing incremental decreases, we all remain above where we were by and large pre-2019. And so when we're making, trying to figure out why these cities may see decreases now, well, likely it's the same sort of conversation we could have why DC saw decreases last year. And so I think what I would say is that we, like all cities, you did say, are deploying many of the same strategies because I think everybody would maintain that the levels are higher than 2019 and not where we want to be. And so I think that's really the discussion, is that some have gone up, some have gone down, but we're working diligently to see decreases across the board.
Yes.
What is the plan to address the guns? The acting chief had said that there is conversation to do that with prosecutors. And then the follow-up question to her comment was that conflict resolution is not working. Does that mean that violence interruption is not working?
Okay, you asked a couple of things. So what was the first thing you said?
So the first question is the plan on guns. How is the city working? What conversations are being had to address the guns being brought into the city?
We are, as you know, and I'll direct your attention to a couple of slides, and I will ask the assistant chief to talk about our partnerships with a number of the federal agencies that are focused on guns, and a number of our investigations that have been wide-ranging in terms of the number of people involved, the guns and drug trafficking that we've seen in our city that our federal partners have helped us with. And I'm really, Chief, do you want to add anything else to that?
Yes, we've engaged our federal partners on interstate firearms trafficking. So we've had a lot of guns recovered in the city the last few years, and the numbers keep going up. You know, we had 3,200 roughly last year. We're on pace for that again this year. When we look at where the guns are coming from, a lot of them are privately made firearms. Now, there's some federal legislation pending out there. The Supreme Court weighed in on regulation to make those guns subject to the 1968 Gun Control Act. So that's that piece right there. But within the city, our intelligence apparatus is being bolstered to look at the data and try to find the commonalities about where the guns are coming from. It's not a simple, hey, stop this truckload. It doesn't work that way. We have a lot of 5 and 7 gun trafficking organizations that are out there. When I say organizations, that's not an organization. That's a group of people that are moving guns from other parts of the country here. What I want to do is try to start making public the interstate trafficking efforts that we do have with our partners. So a lot of these cases actually get prosecuted in other parts of the country, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, where the federal statutes are, the jurisdiction is there. So we're going to share that information with you just to show you what we're doing collectively. But there's going to be a robust effort to look at the data, look at the trafficking patterns, compare that with how the guns are being used in the city, and direct our enforcement efforts in that vein. In terms of like robbery suppression, and the chief talked about that earlier, is that we see the trends where cars are carjacked in Ward 7 and 8 in the midnight tour. And then they're being used to commit armed robberies and armed carjackings in the 3rd District, in the 4th District, in the U Street corridor. We know those trends. Those are not surprises to us. And so as we deploy our assets around the city, it's because we know what the trends are. When we're looking at how many officers are in every district, yeah, we have officers somewhat evenly spread out throughout the city because of the crime trends. And so we're looking at focusing on where the guns are coming from, how they're being used by our criminal element, and right now it's in that robbery space and the shooting space.
I'd also note that in the Safer, Stronger Amendment Act that we have made some policy proposals to strengthen both our local law around gun trafficking, whether it's deserialized guns or otherwise, and penalties around some of what we see in the gun trafficking space. And so we're hopeful that we'll continue to be able to work with council on some more of the proposals that are in the Safer, Stronger Amendment Act to help add what we always say is that we want to have as many enforcement tools as possible.
And then the other question was the violence interruption then, the chief's comments of conflict resolution not working here. So does that mean that violence interruption is not working?
I think, well, the chief's gone now, but I think her comments were broadly around issues of people who have guns, who use guns to settle arguments. And I don't know that she was referring to the kind of gang and turf issues that violence interruption is designed to solve. For example, what she's responding to today appears to be people known to each other, familial situation, and one shot at the other one. That's an example of no conflict resolution skills in the presence of a gun.
Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings.
Peace and
Right here.
blessings.
Yep.
Empirically, thank you. What aspects of the emergency legislation can you point to that caused a reduction in violence over the last month? That's my first question. Second question, in regards to the conflict resolution, what support, if any, are you throwing behind the council's efforts to push OSSI to create curriculum around that? And my third question is in regards to the conflict that happened around Howard University earlier this week. Is the curfew response being tailored to Georgia Avenue? And what communication has there been with the university in terms of preventing future incidents of that?
Let me start with your last question first. The chief already talked about piloted areas where MPD's data indicate that you have a lot of juveniles out past curfew hours. And this is a targeted approach to deal with very specific areas of concern. The chief also mentioned a partnership with DYRS where those young people will be taken to DYRS. Not to police precincts where police officers were supervising them. Instead, they will be supervised by our DYRS staff until their parents are located. Those are for kids who are curfew violating. Now, the kids who are actually engaged in criminal conduct, they will be engaged on another path. Kevin, will you speak to the OSSI and conflict resolution issue? I'm not as familiar with what you referred to from the council, but I can tell you what we've been working on.
Thank you. And I'll provide some operational detail to some of the response, because it was in response to the mayor's order that some of the actions were identified that speak to your question. And what will happen at schools now and over the course of this year is, one, a much larger section of adults at the school will receive intensive conflict resolution training. It is sometimes at schools that you'll have a certain set of job types at schools that will get that intensive training, and kids will get referred to that adult. But we want to make sure all the adults in the school who have those trusted relationships have the intensive skills training. So you'll see a much larger number of adults get really intensive skills training. Second, we're going to be changing what it means for in-school discipline and in-school suspension, which is sometimes kids going to a room and being removed from the rest of the student body, in which the in-school suspension will include some therapeutic intervention, a caseworker or social worker to be able to work with the kids during that suspension so it is both effective from a learning and therapeutic standpoint. And that'll be a change in the experience for schools broadly for what in-school suspension means. And then finally, the chancellor and the deputy mayor have been looking at what it means when a student really safely cannot be in the school for a period of time. So we're looking at both out of placements to alternate schools or locations that allow for an individual to have intensive therapeutic help for 4 to 6 weeks, not at their home school, but at a setting which is probably going to be an underused part of an existing school building to receive that therapeutic intervention. And we also do need to look back, and the Deputy Mayor for Education is looking at changes to be made to disciplinary rules that exist in statute that'll provide more flexibility for school principals and school leaders when they need for a child to safely be outside of the school, to have the tools within statute to be able to do that. There are currently limitations on the ability of a school to be able to identify a student who needs to be safely out of the school and place them outside of the school. So this is all in response to the mayor's order, and these are actions that will be playing out, some immediately, some requiring the time and space of developing programs and funding programs over the course of the school year. And I was going to go add just a couple of notes on the other two parts of the mayor's order, because I think they all speak to actions related to important gaps. The second area is asking the Deputy Mayor for Operations and Infrastructure to look at where there are jobs within DC government in which we can really place individuals who have criminal records who are caught up in violence. In the immediacy, very quickly, DPW has a long history of doing this. They identified 26 positions that they're filling right now and hoping to have a class of individuals who are referred to them by the WON's office and the Office of Gun Violence Prevention to be able to start in October for DPW positions. There's an immediate effect of trying to fill those positions with jobs that are identified for individuals caught up in violence. And the second part of this is a larger discussion that speaks to changing some of the rules and laws that we have in the city that many employers have had for a long time that define what it means to be in a position that's considered safety sensitive. So we have some positions, actually many, within government in which there is probably an over-application of criminal background check for types of jobs in which there's not an obvious nexus to one's criminal record. That's a longer discussion that involves changing our underlying DC code and also our underlying DC rules around what we declare to be a position relative to a criminal background check. But in the immediacy, DPW was able to identify 26 positions. They're getting filled in October by a class referred to them over the summer for individuals who are in need. And finally, and I'll speak to Health and Human Services on the next slide, there was a call for respite. So one of the most common requests we get is when a mother, a grandmother, a family member knows their child is caught up in something, hasn't broken the law, hasn't gotten arrested, what do you do with that? And so CFSA will be rolling out in October, in response to the mayor's order, a really transformation of what 211 is in the city that will allow for a caregiver, a parent, a friend to call 211 for an individual who they believe is caught up in violence and have a response to that call be one that is appropriate. So that will be a referral to both an individual, help them navigate social services, as well as a referral to the WON's office if there's a program there that requires more immediate intervention. So it will not launch a CFSA investigation. It's a warm line that allows for a concerned parent, grandparent, sibling, friend to be able to flag someone who has not done anything wrong, but they believe is caught up into something that may bring them harm. And those are all actions that are taking place over the next month. Some of them will require, like to look at the underlying disciplinary code, proposals to make adjustments to legislation that will take a little bit longer. And the final area, I'll have the Deputy Mayor speak briefly, is what we're doing in response to the Mayor's order call to look at violence prevention programs and develop some consistency around metrics and performance.
Sure, we're really fortunate in the district to have a wide array and really continuum of violence prevention and intervention services, and those are defined in lots of different ways, both violence interrupters, but a whole host of other programs that fit in that space. And so we've done a lot of work in meeting with our partners, both in DC government that have programs and also at OAG and CJCC to really look at the programs themselves, populations they're intended to serve, where there's overlap where we may coordinate, and some of that we've put into some sort of very immediate communication protocols when it comes to critical incidents or otherwise. And also to really look at contracting and make sure that we are not creating a market of competition, but really that we are working together. And so we've done that work and come up and continue to refine. But some of that you've even seen in the work we've done with the Deputy Mayor on Deputy Mayor for Education on safe passages, to align more closely with our continuum and make sure that our contracts are tight. And so we continue that process. Like I said, we've met with OAG and really are discussing how can we be sure that regardless of where the programs are housed, that the populations we serve are very clear. The intent of our acute programs of violence intervention are aimed at reducing crew-based gun violence and making sure that there's clarity there, and then at really looking at what are the right things to be measuring and the metrics there. And the process of what you see consolidation, that's really a process that we're looking at across the government. How can we be most efficient with our resources? Because again, you've heard us say this was a tough budget year this past year. We anticipate that. And so we want to make sure that we're being efficient and effective and aligned. And so a lot of work in that space, a lot of collaborative work, like I said, with our partners at OAG and CJCC as well.
Okay, and finally, I just want to call your attention to, and we won't go through the slides, but we have prepared for our press partners some bullets about back-to-school preparation. And we will also make available to members of the public, and we encourage everybody to go to our website and download this back-to-school guide. I think this is the second year I've produced this, but it provides a lot of information in one place about the various programs that we have available. I've heard from you and others, well, there's not a program for this and there's not a program for that. Then I'll say, well, actually there is. And so we all need to spend some time, especially parents and caregivers who are sending their kids back to school, learning about the early learning programs that are available, learning about preschool, after-school opportunities, DPR opportunities that support learning as well, how families, for example, can ensure that they have the internet at home that supports learning. And I want to highlight page 13, which talks about as a full list of how families can tap into social and emotional and behavioral supports for their young people. We've separated the high school programs that are available. Families should know about the scholarships and out-of-school time scholarship opportunities that are available for their young people, including DC Tag, DC Futures, the Mayor Scholars Undergraduate Program, as well as preparing for college with a free FAFSA program that we're getting everybody involved in. I also want to highlight the number of career and technical programs that we have launched. I hear in the community sometimes, well, what about vocational training? And what education officials refer to and call that type of training now is career and technical education. And we have launched some very robust programs, and we highlight every school and every program that offers such a program. I also want to spend some time talking about Kids Ride Free and transportation to school. And this is very important that parents know that we offer a School Connect program, and you should talk to your school if your child needs some individualized transportation. We want to work with you about that. Kevin and Lindsay, if you could say a little bit more about Safe Passage, that would be great.
Sure. So we, in partnership with the Deputy Mayor for Education, have launched Safe Passage. School has already started this week. We had training for over 150 Safe Passage workers. The Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, our office, will be assuming responsibility primarily for Safe Passages October 1, but it has been a partnership in making sure that there's clarity of what our Safe Passage workers do and where they'll be, that there's connectivity with schools, which is something that we've heard that principals and school leaders want to know who their Safe Passage workers are, so we're making sure that that's the case and that we have clear communication channels and ways that schools can communicate with us and we can communicate with them. And so we're excited about all of that work that's been ongoing this year, and that we've already started the school year, but really are ramping up for October 1 for a good transition to ensure that we're meeting our framework here of a really good continuum of youth safety, whether they're on their way to school, in school, or in community. And so that's a big part of the reason for the alignment to DMPSJ, because we have so many of the public safety agencies and violence intervention workers and others, so that we have a really good, tight communication path.
And I would just like to emphasize as well the Kids Ride Free program, which is somewhat a misnomer because it's not free. We pay for it. And when I mean we, it's the taxpayers of the district that pay for it. So every child that's in one of our schools is entitled to a free ride to school. And so parents should make sure that they learn from school officials how to get that Kids Ride Free card. And they should also emphasize to their students to use it. There's no reason to jump a turnstile. There's no reason to run around it. There's no reason for any of that. And we want you to avoid that conflict because we have paid for your ride to school. So use your card, tap your card, so we know exactly how much we should be paying Metro, and that you can have a safe and efficient free ride to school. Finally, I want to highlight in this publication, which will be available online, all the contact information for the mayor's liaisons in each ward, as well as our public education team, which includes our deputy mayor, state superintendent, chancellor of schools, and the director of the executive director of the public charter school board. And finally, the members of the council who serve as oversight of our public education agencies because it's in the committee of the whole. And finally, a calendar for DC Public Schools so that parents and guardians can plan for those days where the kids won't be in school. So with that, that's all that we have for today. I know a lot of questions have already been asked. We can take another round. You haven't asked any questions. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Cristina Londoño. I'm with Telemundo Network. And I was wondering, the state of Massachusetts declared a state of emergency yesterday. The mayor of New York says his city is at a breaking point with housing 58,000 migrants. And I was wondering if you could give us an update on the migrants that have been bused to Washington, D.C., if they're still here, if you have the resources, how many there are, the buses coming in. And, a few blocks from here, in front of the homeless shelter, we see dozens of migrants hanging in the street every day. I don't know if they're considered a public safety crisis or what's going on with that.
Kevin, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the mayor stood up, as you know, an Office of Migrant Services that continues to this day to work each and every day with the nonprofit providers that do some of the on-the-ground work. We still both receive buses, but also we receive individuals who show up not in buses who are migrants, and they have developed an effective operation. So when there are families involved, they in particular get under the care of the Office of Migrant Services. And on any given night, we have within our forward movement location where we house people for a short period of time before they often we assist with their movement to their desired destination, about 100 individuals that are parts of families. The city continues to house just over 1,000 individuals and families in hotels. That is the product of receiving families over the course of the many months in which we received high volumes of buses. We have seen that number in hotels go down over the past few months from about 1,200 individuals and families in those longer stay hotels to about 1,000 to 1,100. And that's what we see for families. Now, for individual adults, it's different. We are prohibited by law from asking for immigration status. So when someone presents to a homeless shelter, they cannot ask, were you a migrant, are you undocumented? So we know more anecdotally what our homeless adult system has seen, and they have seen a moderate increase in tenancy in which the providers believe are likely the result of migrants coming here. But we don't have the kind of clarity of data because the laws don't allow us to ask that. So if you see individuals outside of a shelter, they're likely adults. I've had direct discussions with the folks who work every day in those shelters. They typically have relatively short stays in DC, but we do have a moderate number. It's not the majority or vast majority of folks who are housed in shelters every day that are adults, but it does provide some number.
But Texas is still sending the buses.
Not to the degree or quantity that they have been sending before, so I want to be clear. We still receive buses, but we also receive individuals who are, through other means, finding ways to DC, often looking to go elsewhere. But we are still receiving buses, but it is not the scale that we've been seeing prior to what we see today.
Yes.
I know we can't generalize gun violence, but I know in the past we've gone to neighborhoods and people are wondering what's going on. Can we characterize kind of some of the trends that we're seeing? Is it more of these domestic-related incidents? Is it gang activity? Because so often they see the aftermath and are wondering, what's going on in the neighborhood. We haven't seen this before.
Chief, do you want to?
Yes, sir. It's all of the above. Even the incident we're working right now is domestic related, and then a lot of our conflicts are between known individuals that have a confrontation and escalates to gun violence because of the proliferation of weapons, and that's a problem that we've got to get a handle on. Our crew violence continues, and we have concentrated efforts to conduct investigations, not only within MPD, with our federal partners, to look at these neighborhood conflicts. And if there are areas of investigation that we can push forward on, we're going to do that. We've had success around the city with our violence reduction teams to look at neighborhood conflicts where they're engaged in patterns of crime. So our Violent Crime Suppression Division is looking at all of that. What is most concerning to us is these random acts between either known individuals or these one-off situations where conflicts arise between adults and juveniles. The juvenile space is extremely troubling because they're out in the middle of the night, and we really got to get a handle on that. So it's all of those factors in play, and we're trying to address all of those concurrently.
And then just to follow up on how many guns have actually been turned in because residents have tipped off since the program started?
That's a good question. But do you have that at the top tip line?
I don't have it in top.
We can get that back to you.
Sure.
And we've been offering rewards for tips. That's not new. Some of the categories increase. And it is a great question because I think sometimes people don't think we actually give out money, but we give out a lot of money for good tips.
And I think sharing that number will have people that would even consider it, which I talk to every day, be like, people are partaking in this program. Yeah.
We'll get that out to you to be more. We announce it every now and then, but it is a real program and people get real money. Yes.
Speaking of random attacks, what's the status of the investigation around what happened at Howard University? Have any suspects been implicated? What's the status? And going back to my original question, what empirically can we point at that connects the reduction in some crime to the emergency bill? Like how many pre-trial defendants were detained, vice versa,
Yeah. So we'll have to that Howard University situation is under investigation. It's active. I'm going to have to coordinate that statement with our Public Information Office. In terms of the legislation, the holes specifically, without having the numbers right in front of me, are extremely helpful. I know the Deputy Mayor tracks these, and we've seen an increase in holes, which is critically important, especially when violent crime occurs, armed carjackings, contact shootings, and of course homicides and things of that nature. So getting some of our most violent people off the street is going to help reduce crime. And I can't emphasize that enough because we spend a lot of resources on these cases, and getting shooters off the street is going to reduce crime.
Okay, okay, 1, 2. Okay, those are the last two. Yes.
I have a couple of questions. One is on information shared online that since 2016, so 7 years ago we're talking about, the mayor's office, through the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, has been providing the council with felony crime report data. And those reports have been saying each time that, quote, "This suggests a high percentage of arrests are never prosecuted." Did your office know about this? Because it appears that these reports are speaking to an issue that's only been raised within the past year or two, that prosecutions are not happening at the rate that you all want to see them happen at.
Well, we've been talking about the ecosystem. Every chief of police that I've worked with has talked about the ecosystem. So I don't think that's an accurate statement.
I mean, it's in the report saying that the data that's being provided from the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety's office to the council is saying that that data is suggesting a high percentage of arrests are never prosecuted. It's quoted going back to 2016. So my question really is, did your office know about this? And if so, it sounds like it didn't, but why are we only hearing about...
I don't sound like I'm confusing you with what I just said. So let me be clear. If you're asking me, did I know that there are fewer prosecutions than arrests? Yes.
You knew this?
Of course.
Since when?
Since forever.
So why are we only hearing about this now, though, as a major
Perhaps you're
issue?
only hearing about it, Stephanie.
Okay. But we've been talking about public safety and the issues, and it's only been within maybe the past year or two that your office has really been pushing this ecosystem. Everybody has to come together.
That's not true.
Okay.
That's not true.
So
what's your question? That's not true. What's your question?
I have two, actually, one for the chief,
Okay.
one for the city administrator. Chief, just quickly, somewhat in connection to the Howard University fight, but we're hearing chatter or whatnot about possible juvenile fight clubs in D.C. Do you know anything about this, where juveniles organize going out, trying to provoke altercations, physical fistfights?
Anecdotally, Mark, I mean, we're just starting to wrap our heads around certain things that are in social media. But it's a little too early to say that's a trend, and I don't want to ever see that happening here, because, and I will tell the public and the young people that potentially could be involved in this, that we're monitoring all of that, and do not try to participate in those kind of activities in this city. That's not going to be condoned. It's going to be taken extremely seriously, but in terms of that being a trend, I'm not aware of that at this point.
I appreciate that. And then, Mr. City Administrator, can you provide us an update today on the response to the district dogs flooding and the timeline with the CAD report, and, you know, when first responders first made entry there, and give us some specifics today?
I can provide as much as I know. I think getting the full picture will require the benefit of additional time and assessments. So I've looked at the CAD notes. I've also listened to some of the calls and talked to both the fire chief and the OUC director. What we do know is that the original incident, the firefighters at the nearby firehouse did respond. They self-dispatched. They responded to what they saw quickly and heroically from the beginning to be able to rescue individuals trapped in the underpass or were occupants of cars that were getting submerged in water. We also know that there were at least 3 calls made to 911 between 5:06 and 5:18. Each of the calls came from different individuals, 2 of them from out of the jurisdiction, one from the last one at 5:18 from, it looks like, individuals who were inside of district dogs. And that information was communicated over the dispatch after the call that came from the individuals who were inside. Now, what is still getting identified, and that I think is needed to really paint the full picture, is really looking through and transcribing some of the radio traffic to be able to understand the time frames in which, when did the firefighters on scene become aware that there were individuals who were trapped inside of district dogs, and dogs who were trapped inside of district dogs. And I think that requires the benefit of a full review and investigation. Sometimes my review of calls and some of the CAD notes lets me speak with you for some clarity. This is one where I do think they'll have to look at the full radio transcript, put timestamps on them to understand exactly when the on-scene responders became aware and responded to the folks that were inside district dogs.
So can I just follow up? And I apologize for my frustration in advance, but, you know, we've been asking for days on this, and, you know, you've listened to the calls, and so when you listened to the calls that came from there, did they describe a dire situation? Did they convey to the 911 operator that it was an emergency?
The call to me, I'll just say to me, the call at 5:18 was clear. The other two calls talked about flooding inside the building. And what I need to know, and it's part of the review, is what the radio traffic and conversation was after those first two calls. And as I stand here, I don't yet know what happened after those first two calls.
And so do you know the time that first responders first made entry or attempted to make entry into the district dogs? Because from the CAD report, it appears that it's well after 5:06 and at least several minutes after 5:18.
That's why I want to understand the full outcome of the review. So I don't right now know exactly when they gain entry. I need for the folks looking at it to listen to all the radio traffic, to interview folks and put timestamps on it. And that yet hasn't happened.
Do you believe that there was some type of I mean, it appears from the cheap seats that there was some type of a delay, some type of a breakdown there, that whether it was from the caller's end, the dispatcher's end, the on-scene responders' end, but it just seems like there were calls coming in from, by your account, from 5:06 to 5:18, and during those 12 minutes, it does not, because even in the CAD report, I think that 5:18 call says we're still in here waiting for help. Is that right?
I want to be careful with what I say because I want to make sure that I don't speak before, to your very direct question, before I have the full benefit of knowing what the radio transcripts are. And I don't have that right now.
But so what is your initial read of this? Was this a well-oiled operation, or was there room for improvement
in
here?
this very open setting, I really want to look at the radio traffic before I give you a sense of what I think really happened here. I think I owe it to all the people involved, all the employees that were involved, the folks who lost dogs that remember their families before I give that kind of declarative statement.
And then just along the same line, is there some type of an after-action investigation into the dog care center, into district dogs? I don't know what type of, if any, evacuation plan they're required to have, like a human daycare center. I assume would be required to have some kind of evacuation plan. Is there any kind of investigation that the city is launching to see that the operator was in full compliance with, and I don't know if there are requirements that they have an evacuation plan for something.
The reason why Director Rodriguez was at the press conference yesterday is when we have this multi-agency, and in this case also private sector response to a difficult incident, that we look at it really holistically, and HCMA does carry out, in this case, an after-action report that will include a look at both the government operations and the interplay of private actions with what the government actions were.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sam.
I just want to ask about the curfew because school's about to start. How significant is this going to be? You said 7 areas. Will we know what the areas are? And some characterization of just, why you want to make sure this is happening, because we really haven't focused on curfew in D.C. that much.
So the areas are listed, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, the areas are listed, and so you can see them here. And the reason there's a focus on juvenile curfews is what you've heard the chief and now Executive Assistant Chief Benedict say, is that we need people to know where our young people are, and that we've seen too many patterns of honestly criminal activity by juveniles in overnight hours when really they should be home or in a safe space. And so our focus is on making sure that we do what we always do, hold our young people accountable, but also provide them rehabilitative services. And what we think here is that this is an opportunity for us to connect what might be a young person in crisis in their family with the type of services and supports that we know that DWRS has, rather than MPD picking up and simply having at a precinct or otherwise, that we're going to do our market best to ensure that that young person who really should be out at 4 and 5 and 3 in the morning isn't, so that they're safe, the public's safe, and that we're also connecting with them to provide services and supports.
And I heard the mayor say that they wouldn't be taken to lockup, but that they would be taken to, I guess, I'm not sure where, but they're not going to be locked up. But the police will be picking them up. It won't be somebody else.
No, MPD will pick them up, and they'll be brought to the Youth Services Center, where we'll hold them non-securely.
Youth Services, is that like
It's the
Olivet,
YRS.
Mount Olivet Street?
Yes, Mount
Okay,
Olivet.
so that really is kind of the juvenile facility.
It is the juvenile facility, but we have, back when there was a statutory change, we did operational changes because we know that young people who are charged with status offenses can't be held securely. So we have developed a way to hold youth on non-secure side while making sure they're in a safe space.
Mayor, I know earlier this week you addressed Councilmember White's request for the National Guard proposal for it. I was wondering if you are in favor of armed, uniformed National Guard troops on the streets of the city's capital or the nation's capital.
When we need the National Guard to support a specific mission, we don't have any trouble calling on the National Guard. The National Guard don't have police. They have some police officials, but that is not what their primary training in the district. The district's National Guard is for.
So have you talked to any federal partners about entertaining that proposal?
I just told you what I know about their capabilities and preparedness. And what we need to figure out in this city, and I'm glad that the council is interested in more police personnel. I wish they had been more interested in police personnel for the last 3 years, but we are where we are. And so what you've heard us talk about is how we're going to deploy our resources in a most strategic and best way possible, and we'll continue to focus on that. Yes.
Transcripts from the 911 calls to the public on the flooding, the fatal flooding that happened?
I think we generally, when an incident like that of great interest happens, we will release transcripts, but not the actual audio of the call, but some verbatim transcripts.
And can you tell us, do you have any concerns with what you said was, you described some of the first two calls coming through as flooding inside, but the dispatch and what was said was a leak, not flooding. Do you have any concerns there?
I think that was all part of the after-action review.
Any message you would have to residents who, it's usually the understanding when we do these reports on OUC especially, that it's the OUC director who will review those calls the day of, if not the next day, and it's been 4 days later, and that's still information that we have not been able to get for those people affected.
I know she reviewed the calls the day of, because I talked to her the day of. What is sometimes very helpful, and in this case is helpful, if not essential, is really also looking at and listening to some of the radio traffic, which just takes a lot longer to do, because you have to listen to it, try to put timestamps on it, and that's the process that's been undergoing over the past few days. Additionally, the call takers and dispatchers don't work every day. They work a long shift and have a few days off, so you also need to interview the initial responders at FEMS. You have to interview your call takers and dispatchers, and you usually have to be able to wait until they return to duty to be able to have an in-person sit-down interview.
And then, I don't know if the mayor wants to talk about this, but on the juvenile curfew pilot, we've been talking about juvenile curfews for a while, and every time we've asked in the past, we're told DC has one already. Can you tell us what precipitated this pilot program now? What was it that you guys actually said we have to do this right now?
I think it's what I said, that we continue and always are looking for ways to make sure our young people are safe and that our city's safer. So where we see, and certainly this summer, we've seen some instances where we have a lot of young people out when they shouldn't be. And so our goal is to make sure that they're safe and that the public is safe. And so, yes, there is a curfew law, so there's no policy change we need to make there, and we're choosing in these particular areas where maybe we've seen young people involved in criminal activity that we don't want them to be involved in to launch this pilot.
And then, Mayor, if you can point out to us where you have raised lower prosecution investigation.
Can you say what? What did you just say?
If you can point out to us where you've raised lower prosecutions as an issue dealing with crime in the past, we will gladly include that in our reporting.
Oh, you can, and I'm sure that if you would take some time and do some research for your stories, you can go back to the Chief Kathy Lanier where we've been talking about prosecutions. You can go back to a press conference that I had with the prosecutor Jesse Liu to talk about how we could focus on more prosecutions. It is in the public space.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, everybody.